Super interesting, Jeff. I can imagine you take those last couple strands you mentioned and do something else, which is maybe a college could be more differentiated and say, hey, you are the right fit for us. I get the worries of are we rejecting someone because of some bias or something, but maybe we say, hey, actually, with your application, we know these five other colleges would be great places for you to look. Maybe we're helping them out as long as we're not undermatching them. But it gets very interesting there as we go in. But it relates to something else I'm curious about as I hear you wax poetic about these possibilities, which is I'm curious if you think there's going to be a situation of haves and have-nots in these areas. Like heard what Stanford did with AI. You're just talking about these correlations and maybe causation at some point we can figure out, gee, this student, took this experience and didn't do well and therefore they're not going to be a fit here. How cool is that? We heard what ASU is doing. How many institutions, Jeff, are going to be able to keep up? Is there going to be an arms race? And if so, what are the implications for the have-nots in your view?
Yeah, and I think the short answer is yes. Michael, I think I told you this last year when I took a separate trip to the University of Michigan, not when we were there for the campus tour last year. I got to tour its relatively new Center for Academic Innovation with its executive director, which many of our listeners probably know, James Devaney. It's a 47,000 foot facility that's housed in the original Borders bookstore, by the way, which was the defunct chain that was actually
Good
founded
way to
in
repurpose
Ann Arbor.
something.
Yeah, especially bookstore to academic innovation. But the center it's just absolutely gorgeous in terms of its design, and it's really the university's hub for building new online programs, new credentials, to teach you use tech tools that are then licensed to other universities. It's really kind of as I say, it's master control for its efforts around AR and VR. It has these huge studios to do AR and VR for college courses. And I bring that up because as I walked through the center with James, I realized just how much further ahead Michigan was on academic technology because it had the resources, it had the money to invest. And now the same is true with AI, right? Whether it's Stanford or Michigan or Cornell or ASU, these are all universities either with the connections or with the money to make these investments in AI. And when you were asking me about this, I was thinking, okay, what is the solution to this problem? Because I don't think we want a growing divide. We already have a growing divide on so many fronts in higher ed. Do we want yet to add another one to it? And I was thinking about the history of the internet, of the development of the internet in higher ed. And when the internet gained popularity in the late 1990s, colleges and universities were really one of the first entities to kind of outgrow its bandwidth limitations. Because you remember, researchers were sharing a lot of data and other things over the very early stages of the internet at that time. And so what was created was something that was later on called Internet 2. It received money and support from both the National Science Foundation, the NSF, and at that time from MCI, the former big telecommunications firm.
Dave, I haven't heard it in a while.
Yeah. Well, if you remember from being in DC, the original arena that was built downtown was the MCI Center, now the Verizon Center, or now Capital One, I guess. It's gone through many name changes. But what I found fascinating about that, Michael, is that the NSF and MCI it was a great public-private partnership, and eventually this came under the modern day EDUCAUSE, which of course is the big IT association in higher ed. And I was starting to wonder, could the same thing happen today? And think about it in this way. There's a lot of discussion right now around regulation of AI companies. What if part of any bill that, and of course this is assuming that we have a functional Congress, so let's put that aside for a second, right? But what if part of a bill, there's a little horse trading because we know AI companies don't want regulation, but maybe you say to the AI companies, okay, well, we'll do this and this, but if you, in turn, you have to build these sandboxes, right? And maybe make these sandboxes equitable around the country. So there's some geography around it. Maybe allow different types of institutions. So HBCUs and regional publics and community colleges to be part of that. And in some ways, it's similar to what NSF is doing around these regional centers of excellence around the CHIPS Act, where they're bringing to qualify for that money, you have to bring in community groups, you have to bring in corporations, you have to bring in higher education institutions. There seems to be models out there that we could copy, because I think if we continue down this road where it's the ASUs and the Stanfords and the Cornells and the Michigans of the world, I do fear that we're going to basically have, the elites and the big publics and then kind of everybody else. And as we know, the everybody else is where most students go to college, and they serve most communities in the US. And if they're left on the sidelines and not able to be part of this, it does really worry me.